Sandy hit New Jersey, I was the public assistance unit head. I was a lieutenant. And as the storm was approaching, it was ironic because I was assigned the first shift at the State Emergency Operations Center in Trenton, kind of coordinating the monitoring of the storm as it approached. So as the public assistance unit head, what we generally do is prepare for what damage assessments might need to be done and deploying teams out into impacted areas. So I had kind of a twofold mission at the time. One, preparing my unit for potential of doing damage assessments, and then the second role was working at the Emergency Operations Center, kind of monitoring the approach of the storm. We were hoping for the best, but anticipating and preparing for the worst. So we were in close contact with the National Weather Service, obviously tracking the path of the storm. At the point we realized that we were going to be at ground zero or the point of impact, it was just a matter of taking the proper notification method or measures, the notification measures, and communicating with our superintendent of state police, who is the state director, and messaging over to the Attorney General's office and the governor's office exactly our preparedness efforts in working with the counties. FEMA had pre-deployed some assets to the State Emergency Operations Center, so they were on board with us. And then really making sure the citizens of the state were following whatever precautionary measures that we had requested, including evacuation of the barrier islands and things of that nature. And seeing all of the state and federal assets that were not only represented at our State Emergency Operations Center, but deployed throughout our state, probably sticks out the greatest. I've been involved in a lot of different weather-related and events that necessitated the activation of our State Emergency Operations Center. But when the governor is there several days in a row and he orders his cabinet, his state department commissioners and directors to be there, and they are all there performing whatever function they need to do to help effectuate a proper response at the time, and then it rolled into recovery. I think that's when I realized this was a really big event. We don't normally see that type of representation in the highest levels of state government at the State Emergency Operations Center. We work on a daily basis with our emergency management partners in each of those state departments and agencies. But when all of the bosses show up, you realize this is a pretty big deal. Fortunately for us, we experienced 10 presidentially declared disasters in the 2 years prior to Sandy coming. So we had been out working with our local communities in preparing for the impact of any type of storm, from a flood to a nor'easter to a transportation accident. So we work on a day-to-day basis with our municipalities in preparing for these types of events. Certainly the magnitude of Sandy was beyond what we had ever experienced before, but things like the derecho in South Jersey, Hurricane Irene that we had experienced. There were a couple of flooding events, a major snowstorm in December of 2010. So we had a lot of practice in working with our local municipalities and counties, as well as with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, in kind of getting us ready for something of this magnitude. My first experience in seeing the assessments was probably a week or so after the storm hit. And it was an aerial observation. We flew from Long Beach Island down to Brigantine, just looking at the coastline. And to the credit of our first responders and to the people engaged in our recovery efforts, they were already moving sand and clearing debris and beginning those recovery efforts. One of the things we look at in emergency management is trying to get some sense of normalcy back to a situation as quickly as possible. And we do that through a lot of different areas. We do that through trying to get power restoration, roadways cleared, and try to get people back into the communities as quickly as possible. Now, in some situations, that's not possible, and certainly Sandy was one of those, and the coastline was extremely impacted, as we've all seen. You know, I saw the seaside boardwalk that has become iconic of the whole recovery effort with the roller coaster, you know, in the Atlantic Ocean. And seeing that overhead and knowing that, you know, I used to go down there as a child and ride those boardwalk or ride the Ferris wheel and ride the roller coaster and walk the boardwalk. That's when you realize the impact of this storm, and I think that's probably the vision that will stick with me the longest, and certainly has become kind of one of those visions that we see or remember when we talk about Sandy. We had over 12 different states send representatives to help us with damage assessment, preliminary damage assessment through EMAC. We brought in over 250 state troopers from other states to help with security on those barrier islands. Just a tremendous amount of resources from throughout the country that we couldn't have really responded and begun the recovery process without that assistance from all of those other states.